I was 28 years old the day I stood barefoot in my late father's compound, staring at the iron gates as they closed behind me forever. My hands trembled not from grief, but from rage. Everything I had lived for, everything I had been promised, everything I deserved, had been handed to someone who had no blood ties to our family. My own brother's mistress. And the lawyer who orchestrated it. Let's just say, no one sleeps peacefully after snatching meat from a lioness. My name is Kamsi Ochukwu, Kamsi for short. Born and raised in Anambra State, I was my father's only daughter and his pride. My brother, Obiora, was the eldest, charming, entitled, reckless. From a young age, we were raised differently. While I was sent to boarding school and taught discipline, he was treated like a golden child. Every wrong he did was painted over with soft words and excuses. But Baba loved us both. And he made it clear that when he was gone, his legacy, the land, his transport company, and the Enugu Plaza would be divided between Obiora and me. Equally. That was before cancer struck him like lightning on a clear day. In his final days, my father could barely talk. The illness ravaged him. But I was there. I left my job in Lagos, returned home, fed him, bathed him. Obiora visited once in a while, always with one of his flashy girlfriends, never alone. He didn't like hospitals. Said the smell depressed him. Baba passed on a Tuesday morning. The will was to be read on Friday. I thought I knew what was coming. Friday came. We gathered in the family lawyer's office, Barrister Dyke. A man I had known since childhood. A man who had shared Christmas rice with our family. Obiora was late, as usual. And when he arrived, he wasn't alone. She came with him. Mimi. Slender, caramel skin, fake eyelashes like mosquito nets, and a waist that moved like it had a mind of its own. My brother's side chick. I knew her, everyone in town did. She used to work at Club Crystal as a hostess before Obiora made her his princess. When she sat beside him and even dared to cross her legs like she belonged, my stomach turned. The will was read. My hands grew cold. My name was barely mentioned. A small apartment in Abakba. Nothing more. Obiora got everything else, the lands, the transport fleet, and the plaza. And then, to my horror, a property in Lekki, bought only 2 years before Baba fell ill, was willed to Mimi. Yes. Mimi, not even as his wife or fiance. Just Miss Mimi Nwafor. I couldn't breathe. I stood up and shouted, "Is this a joke?" Barrister Dyke adjusted his glasses and said smoothly, "Your father made these decisions when he was of sound mind. The signatures are valid, the documents sealed." But I knew something was wrong. I was with my father when he drafted his original will. I had seen the papers. This was not it. Obiora refused to look me in the eye. Mimi smiled sweetly, then winked at me. The days that followed were the darkest of my life. I was evicted from the family house because it now belonged to Obiora. My belongings were thrown into the street like I was a stranger. I slept in my friend Ada's parlor on a thin mattress, eating once a day, bathing from a bowl. My pride shattered. I was furious, not just at my brother and his mistress, but at Barrister Dyke. That was when I remembered something strange. A week before Baba died, I walked into his room and found him with Dyke, arguing. Baba had shouted, "You're my lawyer, not Obiora's puppet." But I never found out what they were talking about. I decided to investigate. Barrister Dyke underestimated me. He thought I was just another grieving daughter. But I had contacts. In university, I had studied business law before switching to finance. I understood legal loopholes. More importantly, I had powerful clients in Lagos, including a certain Mr. Olatunji, a man who owed me a favor that could change lives. I made a call. Within days, I had a team of private investigators on Barrister Dyke's trail. I also filed a petition with the Nigerian Bar Association, quietly. The findings came fast. The original will had been tampered with. The signature was forged. The witnesses were fake. The Lekki property had been sold to Mimi weeks before Baba died, with documents signed by a dying man who could barely hold a spoon. Dyke had helped Obiora transfer everything illegally. And then, jackpot. Dyke had misappropriated client funds before. He had buried the evidence. But now, I had all the files. But I didn't go to court. No. Court was for people who wanted justice. I wanted something more. Revenge. I called Dyke to meet me in Enugu under the pretense of negotiation. We met at a high-end hotel. I wore a red suit and heels that echoed with every step. He looked surprised to see me glowing, like a phoenix rising from ash. I slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of the forged will, bank statements, bribes, property fraud, all connected to him. His face turned pale. "You can't prove anything in court," he said, sweating. I leaned in. "I don't have to. I had a deal prepared. A transfer of assets from Mimi back to the estate. He would sign it, or I would leak everything to the Bar Association, to the press, to the world. His career and life would be over." He signed. But I wasn't done. I went after Mimi next. With the property back under my control, I didn't sell it. I bought the building she was renting in Enugu, quietly, through a proxy. Then, without notice, I gave her a 48-hour eviction. She was confused, livid. I watched her yell at the landlord, who redirected her to the new owner. Me. She called Obiora, but he was busy. Rumors had it they'd started falling out after the inheritance scandal. She slept in her car for 3 nights before disappearing from town. As for Obiora, he still has his lands, his business. But no one wants to deal with him now. Word got out, not from me, but from whispers and friends of friends. He lives in the shell of our father's wealth, alone. And me? I restored the will. Donated the Enugu Plaza to a local orphanage in my father's name. I didn't take back the money. I took back dignity. Sometimes justice wears a black robe in court. Other times, it wears heels and red lipstick and smiles while she makes you homeless. I learned that family can be your greatest enemy. That blood is not always thicker than betrayal. But I also learned that silence is a weapon, and patience, a blade. Because the ones who wrong you expect you to cry, scream, beg. They never expect you to rise. And when you do, you don't knock on the door. You burn the house down. For weeks after Mimi vanished, I expected her to retaliate, perhaps drag me to court, or threaten me. But silence lingered. Not because she had forgiven me, but because she had no strength left to fight. Her fall was swift. I heard she went back to her hometown in Ebonyi, where she now sells recharge cards near a motor park. Some say her former friends mock her. Others say she walks with her face lowered, like someone who's haunted, not just by shame, but by the ghosts of dreams that died too soon. And as for Barrister Dyke? He resigned. Not because he wanted to, but because my contact at the Nigerian Bar Association had opened an ethics investigation. To avoid full disgrace, he gave up his license quietly and moved to a smaller town. Last I heard, he was running a small betting kiosk behind a supermarket in Nsukka. Poetic, isn't it? The lion once roared in courtrooms. Now he counts slips behind dusty counters. But you see, none of this brought me joy. Not real joy. Yes, I had fought back. Yes, I had reclaimed part of what was mine. But inside me, there was still a weight. A hollowness. Because the truth is, money and revenge don't heal everything. I still lost my father. And worse. I lost my brother long before that will was ever forged. One evening, as rain battered my windows in Lagos, I got a call. It was Obiora. His voice was quieter, strained. He said, "Kamsi, can we talk?" I paused. My heart warred between old wounds and old love. We met 2 days later in a quiet cafe. He looked different. Thinner. Tired. Like life had finally caught up with his arrogance. He didn't deny anything. In fact, he admitted it all: the bribe to Dyke, the pressure he faced from debt, the reason he gave Mimi that property in Lekki. It wasn't love. It was desperation. And greed. "I thought it would all work out," he said, staring into his cold coffee. "I never expected you to fight back." I asked him, "Then what did you expect me to do? Bow? Weep? Disappear?" He shook his head. "No. I thought you'd forgive me. Like you always used to." That's when I realized forgiveness, to some people, is a license. We sat there for a long time, neither of us saying much. Before I left, I told him one thing. "You didn't just steal property. You stole the last chance we had of being family." A week later, I visited Baba's grave. The wind was gentle that day. I brought white flowers. I told him everything: how I lost, fought, won, and still grieved. And then I said the words I had never said aloud. "I forgive you too, Baba. For being silent when Obiora became a monster. I hope you see now. I turned out strong. Not broken." I felt something shift. Not closure. Not yet. But peace, maybe. Or the beginning of it. Weeks passed. I returned to Lagos, to my firm, to the routine I'd once abandoned. But something inside me had shifted. I had walked through fire and come out burned, but not broken. Every call I made, every deal I signed, I did so with a sharper instinct, a keener eye. No one could play me again. One morning, while reading the papers, I saw a small headline at the bottom of the page. "Enugu lawyer suspended for ethical violations." A blurry photo of Barrister Dyke sat beneath it, eyes cast downward. It wasn't front-page news, but it was enough. His name was stained now. Even if he ever tried to return, no reputable firm would touch him. The system had quietly devoured him. As for Mimi? She had vanished from social media. Her page, once filled with filtered photos, gold watches, and captions like "Small Girl with Big God," was now deactivated. The flashy life had ended. But I wasn't done reflecting. Not just on the chaos, but on myself. I began volunteering, something I hadn't done in years. I partnered with a legal aid foundation in Abuja that supported women who'd been cheated out of inheritance or property. I'd seen firsthand how systems fail women, how documents can be forged, bribes exchanged, and silence weaponized. Now, I was helping them fight back. One woman, Auntie Grace, stood out. At 52, she was thrown out of her late husband's house by his brothers. No legal will. No money. 4 children. She came into the center with nothing but her story. We fought for her like she was royalty. When we won her case and she wept in my arms, I realized something deeper. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about restoration. On a Sunday afternoon, as I sipped Zobo by my balcony, my phone buzzed. A message from Obiora. "I've started therapy. I'm trying to be better. For real this time." I stared at the screen. I didn't reply. Not out of hate, but because not every wound needs to be reopened. Some things are better left to time and distance. I wish him healing. But not proximity. Later that month, I hosted a small gathering to honor Baba, the man who gave me both pain and purpose. Friends came, old family friends too. We unveiled a plaque at the orphanage we renamed in his memory, the KC Foundation Home. As we lit candles and sang, I looked around at all the children, laughing, eating, playing. They would never know the war I fought to get here. And they didn't need to. They just needed to live. Free. Safe. Hopeful. I was stripped, humiliated, betrayed by blood. But I rose. I didn't just reclaim land or money, I reclaimed my voice. And now, I use it not for vengeance, but for others like me, women whose silence was mistaken for weakness, whose inheritance was stolen not just in property, but in dignity. So if you're watching this, and someone once told you to let it go, don't. Fight, but fight smart. Because the real power isn't in revenge. It's in choosing who you become after the battle is over. 6 months later, I found myself standing in front of the family compound once again. The gate was rusted now, the walls faded and chipped. The vibrance that once made this place feel like home had long vanished. The laughter, the roasted corn by the fire in the evenings, Baba's gravelly voice calling my name, all gone. Just shadows remained. I wasn't there to reclaim anything. I wasn't even there for closure. I came to see what had become of Obiora. A neighbor told me he had moved out 2 months earlier, the house was too big, too empty, and too haunted by his own regrets. Apparently, he'd sold part of the transport fleet to settle debts, and Mimi's betrayal had left a dent in his pride that hadn't healed. He was trying to rebuild, the neighbors said, trying to start over. But starting over isn't the same for everyone. Sometimes, it means building again. Other times, it means learning how to live with the ruins. As I walked away, I remembered the day of the will reading, how I had screamed, cried, begged. I remembered the look in Obiora's eyes, guilt hidden beneath arrogance. The same guilt I now realized came from a deep-rooted belief that I wouldn't fight back. That's the tragedy of how some men are raised, they are taught to believe that women exist in the shadows of their ambition. That daughters are temporary visitors in the legacy of men. But I, a daughter, a woman, a rightful heir, had changed that narrative. Back in Lagos, I was invited to speak at a women's summit. I stood before a room full of women, bankers, lawyers, traders, students, and told my story. I didn't dress it up. I didn't skip the pain. I laid it bare. And when I finished, a woman in the audience raised her hand and said, "How did you forgive them?" I paused, looked at her, and smiled. I didn't forgive them for their sake. I forgave them so I wouldn't carry the weight of their actions forever. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing not to let bitterness eat your soul. The room was quiet. But the silence was powerful, not empty, not awkward. It was the kind of silence that follows truth. Today, I run a foundation named after my mother, Igioma's daughters. We fight property injustice, support female legal education, and push for policy reform across eastern Nigeria. My name is no longer just Kamsi, I've become a voice, a mirror, and a warning. And to every young woman out there, watching this, nodding in pain, clenching fists in silence, hear me. You are not voiceless. You are not disposable. And if they ever tell you that you have no claim, fight. Because sometimes, the most dangerous kind of woman is the one who knows what was stolen from her and learns to take it back without blinking. They gave my inheritance to my brother's side chick. They thought I'd break. Instead, I built a life from the ashes. And when I passed the lawyer who once sold my legacy for lunch money, sleeping under a torn umbrella at the edge of a bus park, I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I walked past him quietly. Because true power isn't in shouting. It's in being unbothered, because you know. Justice already spoke.